afternoon. You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's headlines. Speaking at the Grand Sarai, Health Minister Wael Abu Faour says he hopes the necessary communications will be conducted to ensure quorum during the upcoming cabinet sessions. The UN calls on the Syrian government to immediately allow life-saving aid into eastern Aleppo, where about 300,000 people are living under siege. And EU leaders gather in Slovakia's capital, Bratislava, to agree on ways to regain trust in the EU after Britain's vote to leave the European Union. Prime Minister Tamam Slam has met with Health Minister Wael Abu Faour, who said he hoped the necessary communications will be conducted to ensure quorum during the upcoming cabinet sessions. No one wants the obstruction of the cabinet, Abu Faour said following talks with the Prime Minister at the Grand Sarai. The minister wished that Salam's participation in UN meetings in New York will pave the way for discussions related to various issues pertaining to Lebanon. Regarding the position of Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif towards Saudi Arabia, Abu Faour said Lebanon always called for an Iranian-Arab dialogue based on concord and mutual respect without interference in others' internal affairs. Dozens of protesters affiliated with the We Want Accountability civil society movement have blocked the entrance to the Grand Sarai in downtown Beirut to protest political corruption. The protesters called for legislative elections to be held based on a proportional representation system. Parliamentary elections are scheduled to take place in 2017. Lebanese MPs, with the exception of the Free Patriotic Movement, voted to extend their own terms twice, once in 2013 and then in 2014. The MP cited the tense security situation in the country as the reason for not holding elections, as well as the absence of an electoral law that the majority of parties could agree on. Future Movement leader MP Saad Hariri applauded a recent investigation that uncovered a conspiracy to assassinate Progressive Socialist Party chief MP Walid Jumblat, whose safety Hariri said is integral to the safety of the nation. He added that protecting Jumblat, the most prominent Druze leader in Lebanon, is a national and Arab responsibility. First military investigative judge Riyad Abu Ghaida indicted 2 men on Thursday for plotting to assassinate Jumblat at the behest of Syrian intelligence. In the indictment, the judge requested the death penalty for Lebanese national Youssef Munir Fakhir and Syrian national Muhannad Musa for working with Syrian intelligence in an attempt to kill the politician and members close to him by November. A Beirut court has postponed the questioning of slain Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi's son after a request was filed by the defendant's lawyer. Investigative Judge Zahir Hamedi postponed the interrogation of Hannibal Gaddafi, who's been charged with hiding information in the case of disappeared Shiite Imam Musa Sadr. The national news agency said the interrogation was postponed after Gaddafi's lawyer, Akram Azuri, filed a preliminary motion challenging the accusations made by Sadr's family against his client. The family of the disappeared Shiite Imam filed a lawsuit against Hannibal Gaddafi on August 29th over his alleged involvement in the case. Fierce fighting and clashes between government forces and rebels rocked the eastern edge of the Syrian capital despite a fragile truce across the country. A barrage of rocket fire and shelling could be heard coming from the Jobar district, a rebel-held eastern suburb of Damascus. The district has been a battleground for more than 2 years, and nearly all of its pre-war population has fled. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights activist group also reported the clashes and said more than 21 shells and rockets hit parts of Jobar. 2 shells also hit the Bab el-Sharqi neighborhood of Damascus, but did not result in any casualties. The UN has called on the Syrian government to immediately allow life-saving aid into eastern Aleppo, where about 300,000 people are living under siege. The United Nations said none of the 40 trucks ready to bring aid to Aleppo had moved from no man's land at the Turkish border due to a lack of security guarantees. The Security Council will hold an urgent meeting to hear details of a US-Russian deal on Syria as it weighs whether to endorse the agreement. Under the deal, all sides were due to allow deliveries of food and other basic supplies to Aleppo after a ceasefire went into effect on Monday. The Kremlin said it was using its influence to try to ensure the Syrian army fully implemented the shaky ceasefire agreement.
We are as ready to go as we can possibly be. The modalities for ensuring safe passage have not yet been cleared and given to us so that we can move. We know that there is at least 250,000 people in eastern Aleppo who are potentially all of them in need of some kind of aid. The first 40 trucks, as we heard yesterday, are loaded with food for some 80,000 people for a month. And we really, really want to get it to eastern Aleppo. So, as I say, it's highly frustrating. We know the world is watching.
It's up to the co-chairs to really produce this engagement, as the Special Envoy referred to it, along that very short road that is called Castello. And this engagement has to apply to government forces and the armed opposition groups that are still in the area and other armed groups.
You will have to ask the Syrian authorities why they haven't come. It's highly frustrating that they have not come, and of course we urge the authorities and everybody with influence over those authorities to push for that these facilitation letters materialize as soon as possible.
Coming up next, about 200 people line up in Sydney, Australia to be the first in the world to purchase the new iPhone 7. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the English newscast. With British Prime Minister Theresa May absent, EU leaders gathered in Slovakia's capital, Bratislava, to try and agree a diagnosis of why people across the bloc are increasingly voting for Eurosceptic parties, and on ways to regain trust in the EU after Britain's vote to leave the European Union. Years of economic crisis have pushed up unemployment in many member states, while a spate of attacks by Islamist militants and a record influx of migrants have unsettled voters, who are turning increasingly to populist anti-EU parties. Leaders want the informal talks in Bratislava to launch a process that ends with agreements when they meet in March in Italy to mark the 60th anniversary of the bloc's founding Treaty of Rome. A suicide bomber has killed at least 16 people and wounded 35 others while they were attending prayers at a mosque in a northwestern Pakistani tribal area. Today's bombing occurred in a village of Anbar Tehsil in the Muhammad tribal district bordering Afghanistan, where the Pakistan army has been battling the Pakistan Taliban. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. Protesters in Mexico have taken to the streets of the capital to demand the president's resignation as the country gears up for its Independence Day celebrations. Thousands of people gathered in Mexico City demanding that Enrique Peña Nieto resign over his handling of drug violence, corruption, and his recent meeting with the Republican White House hopeful Donald Trump. Demonstrators waving blackened flags of Mexico marched across the capital towards the Zocalo Square, where the president traditionally stands on a balcony of the National Palace the night before the holiday to replicate the grito, or shout of independence, made in 1810. A Swedish appeals court has upheld a detention order for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, dismissing the latest attempt by the 45-year-old Australian to make prosecutors drop a rape investigation from 2010. The decision by the Svea Court of Appeal means that the arrest warrant stands for the computer hacker who has avoided extradition to Sweden by seeking shelter at the Ecuadorian embassy in London since 2012. Assange, who denies the rape allegation, has previously challenged the detention order 7 times. He says he fears he will be extradited to the US to face espionage charges if he leaves the embassy. Swedish authorities have reportedly rejected 7 previous appeals by Assange to drop the arrest warrant. An assailant wielding a meat cleaver injured an off-duty New York City police officer in Midtown Manhattan before being shot 18 times by police. City officials say the attack occurred just before 5 p.m. local time near Madison Square Garden. Police initially tried to subdue 32-year-old Akram Joudeh near West 31st Street and Broadway before an off-duty detective wearing civilian clothes attempted to subdue the suspect. Moving on to Australia, at the Apple store in Sydney, about 200 people lined up in light rain to be the first in the world to purchase the new model iPhone. Apple employees on Thursday handed a $100 voucher to those in line to make up for their disappointment, with some hopeful that Apple had saved a few of the 7+ models for the people that had been waiting in line. Late-night talk show host Jimmy Fallon got up close and personal with Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump's famous blonde hair. At the end of an appearance by Trump on The Tonight Show, Fallon asked if he could do something unpresidential. Take a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Donald Trump. Thank you for giving us the material that we're doing. It's been amazing to follow and exciting because you say some shocking things. I can't even believe.
But I'm trying not to. Anyway.
Yeah, oh yeah. See, that's changing. Yeah. See? That's what I'm talking about. So yeah. Can I mess your hair up?
The answer is yes, but the people in New Hampshire, where I'm going to be in about an hour from now, I hope they're going to understand.
Okay. You say yes?
Go ahead, with my hairspray.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Speaking at the Grand Sarai, Health Minister Wael Abu Fawr says he hopes the necessary communications will be conducted to ensure quorum during upcoming cabinet sessions. The UN calls on the Syrian government to immediately allow life-saving aid to eastern Aleppo, where about 300,000 people are living under siege. And EU leaders gather in Slovakia's capital, Bratislava, to agree on ways to regain trust in the EU after Britain's vote to leave the European Union. Those are your top stories for this Friday. I'm Linda Tamimina. Thank you all for watching.